according to the interwebs. He makes $28 million this year, $30 million next year, and $32 million the year after. And then he's an unrestricted free agent.
I could probably be convinced because I think Damian Lillard is really good. He's in his prime right now, and honestly, there's no guarantee that any of the Knicks' young core ever becomes as good as Lillard. So, depending on the package, obviously.
Right.
But
what about
depending on the cost?
If the Pelicans blow it up, and let's say they trade Anthony Davis and not to the Knicks, because obviously we would trade probably our entire team for Anthony Davis. But what about Drew Holiday? Let's say they blow it up and then they try to trade Drew Holiday for assets. Drew Holiday is like a sneaky all-star, by the way. He's not the guy you think of.
I know. I like Drew Holiday a lot. It would definitely be on the lower end of cost in terms of players and draft picks.
Gotcha. What about Kevin Love, assuming he comes back healthy?
I don't think so. I think all the other players you mentioned were guards where the Knicks need more help. I think, assuming obviously that they sign Porzingis to a long-term contract this summer, Porzingis and Love kind of play the same position, and I don't think it would be that great of a fit. But that's just my first thought off the top of my head.
Gordon Hayward. Let's just say it's not working out with the Celtics, and they decide to trade him for some reason.
It would have to be pennies on the dollar because I would be worried that the Celtics know more about Hayward's injuries than we do, and trading assets within the division in any sport is always a little scary. DeMar
DeRozan. The Spurs are somehow the second worst team in the West, and they say let's just say they decide to blow it up.
Potentially.
Would it depend on who it was?
I think so.
Lastly, again, the last Wizard who's on the trading block here, Otto Porter Jr., who's having a terrible year, but would you trade any of them, maybe let's say one of them, and a pick for Porter Jr.?
Probably not. I'd try and get Kelly Oubre before I'd got
Really?
Porter.
You're a bigger fan of Oubre than Porter Jr.?
I think so. Maybe it's just that there's more raw potential with Oubre, and Porter's kind of a finished product in terms of the type of player he is at this point.
I mean, last year he was fantastic. I mean, in terms of a finished product, he was a guy who did a little bit of everything. Kind of reminded me of like a vintage Nicholas Batum where, you know, when he was in his prime, he just did everything for you. Didn't hurt your field goal percentage or your free throw percentage, and, you know, got steals, blocks, points, rebounds, assists. He did a little bit of everything. He wasn't going to put up 25 a game, but he was going to do his part. But you think Oubre can be better than Porter Jr.?
Potentially.
Okay.
But I still don't think, given Porter's contract and given the fact that I don't think he can be a first or second option on a championship caliber team, I would not trade a whole lot for Porter.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think also, I don't know if you saw, the Wizards just traded away once a Knick, always a Knick, Jason Smith.
Yeah.
I forget who they traded him to.
I think the
Bucks.
Bucks.
It was basically a salary dump move.
They trade him
to
the
Wizards are in a position where they're dumping salary, then you don't potentially have to give up a whole lot of assets if you're willing to just take on the salary.
Right. Which maybe that works for something like Courtney Lee, you know?
Sure, because Courtney Lee's he's in the last year of his contract, right?
I think we have him for one more year. I'm not sure.
If the Wizards are in salary dump mode, then you could probably get him for expiring contracts.
We have Courtney Lee signed through next season.
Gotcha.
So same with Lance Thomas. And Joakim Noah, who decided to put up more points last night than his entire career with the Knicks. So
for him.
That dude. He is on that list. When we go through the least favorite Knicks, he is a top 5 for me, least favorite Knick. I think that was actually episode 5 we had Mark on. I think that was his least favorite Knick, was Joakim Noah.
Well, and it just was a bad move to begin with.
That's more Phil's fault than his fault, but, you know,
right.
Come on, he could have... Anyway, something I haven't really talked about much on this podcast, but Linsanity. And what's cool about you being my brother is that we've been to so many Knick games, and I honestly can't think of a game better that we've been to together than we were at the very first. Linsanity Game. It was Nets. We played the Nets, and Jeremy Lin just went off. What do you remember most about that game?
I remember I was not super excited to go to the game. We had the tickets, and the Knicks were struggling. And
this was one of these teams the Knicks were supposed to be good, and they were just
right.
They could not put it together.
Right. And so I was thinking, all right, we're going to go. They're going to give another uninspiring performance, and they're going to lose. And then Jeremy Lin goes off, and he's going off not only to the roar of the Garden, but he's doing it against one of the best point guards in the league at the time.
Darren Williams.
Yeah. And obviously it is probably one of my favorite games I've ever been to, if not the most favorite game. To piggyback off that, I went back to Washington, and the Knicks played the Wizards a few games later and went to one of the other Linsanity games where he outplayed John Wall.
Yeah.
In Washington. I think that was the game right before the Toronto game when he hit the game-winning three at the top of the key. But between watching the original Linsanity game with you and then following it up in Washington, so the game in Washington was the one where I sort of realized, oh, this might be for real. This is not just a guy having a good week.
Right. Because Darren Williams wasn't ever considered one of the best defenders in the league, but John Wall at that time was. I mean, he was fast, he had long arms, he got a bunch of steals. He was a good defender when he was healthy and in his prime.
He was the type of defender who should have been able to give Lin fits, and Lin still had a really good game, and that was when I sort of realized, oh, this is a thing. This is
right.
Not just Lin having a few good games here. This might be for real.
What game was better to go to? The first Linsanity game at the Garden against the Nets, or the game you went to against the Wizards a few days later?
The first game, definitely. It was a home game, and so with each consecutive basket by Lin, the crowd got more and more into it, and by the end of the game, it was just a giant party. And
right.
And it was just clearly at the time the Knicks needed a shot in the arm, and Lin gave it to them, and it was just exactly what the doctor ordered, so to speak.
What's very interesting about that game, and we were talking about how the Knicks were supposed to be good and they weren't. The guys on the court for the Knicks, we had Chandler, Melo, Stoudemire all in the starting lineup. I mean, this was supposed to be one of the better Knicks teams. We were supposed to go to the playoffs. I know we just gutted our team in the Melo trade the year before, but we were supposed to be good, and I remember that. I don't remember the feeling before the game like you do, but I get why you kind of didn't want to go to the game, why it was kind of such a down part in the Knicks season. Shumpert wasn't coming along like we wanted him to. You know what's very interesting about this game? And I know in the last episode I hated on Jared Jeffries, and I continue to do that. He actually had more minutes than Stoudemire. He played
interesting.
He played 31 minutes, and Stoudemire only played 25. Is there anything specifically in the first game that you remember? I know you said you remember not wanting to go to the game, but then when you were at the game and the crowd was getting bigger and bigger, I mean, is there any specific play or anything that you remember specifically that's just such a vivid memory?
Probably, I want to say in the fourth quarter, he had a few possessions in a row where he just drove right by Darren Williams, and that was sort of the tipping point, and it was sort of the key sequence in the game, if I remember correctly. And it was like, okay, yeah, you had a good first half, you had a good first few quarters, but so many times in the NBA, the better players can turn it up a notch in the fourth quarter, and to watch Lin turn it up in the fourth quarter was pretty spectacular.
I mean, you could arguably say he was the better player.
And for him to get wherever he wanted on the floor, and even to make, I think he made almost every shot at the rim, which, sure, you're at the rim, you should make most of your shots, but it wasn't like any of his drives just rimmed out or were blocked or he didn't get the foul call. Every time he drove to the basket, it was at least 2 points, if not 3, because he would draw the N1. He
shot 50% from the field. He was 10 for 19. And I I love watching the highlights from that game because even his assists were so beautiful. He even had one to Jared Jeffries, and it's just like, it's like, wow, Jeffries made a shot. But but you know what I remember so vividly? I have two memories of that game that I'll never forget moments. It was in the fourth quarter when Chandler goes up to set a pick for a pick and roll, and he crosses up Darren Williams and split the defenders. It was Williams and whoever was guarding Chandler at the time, and went right in between both of them. He used that crossover to get by Williams, and then he got by the other defender in in a split second, and then got to the rim, and then got fouled for the end one. To see him do that against Darren Williams was just that crossover I'll never forget. And the second memory I'll never forget is at the end of the game, the Knicks, and every time they win, they always play James Brown, I Feel Good. Wow, I feel good, right? But that game, they were playing Jeremy by Pearl Jam, which
right. I do remember that.
Just felt so iconic.
Yeah.
I was even talking to my my best friend, whose also name is Jeremy, and I was saying to him, how many athletes have been all-stars named Jeremy? I mean, because we couldn't think of one.
Jeremy definitely seems like a baseball name.
I also very much remember the Toronto Raptors game. I was watching that with him, and we were in our dorm in college, jumping up and down after he hit the shot, jumping up and down and hugging, while we couldn't believe it. Do you think the Linsanity game was the greatest, has been so far the best? I mean, because you've been to some Knicks playoff games. Do you think that, where does that Linsanity game rank for you in terms of games you've been to? I mean, we've been season ticket holders our entire lives.
I don't think it's number one. I think it's number two.
What would number one be?
Number one was I got to see the Knicks play the Bulls, Jordan's Bulls, in the 90s, and it was the year the Bulls won 72 games. And so I went in thinking, I'm going to watch Jordan at his greatest, Pippen at his greatest, the greatest team ever. And instead, the Knicks blew the Bulls out by 32 points.
Wow. Okay, I
remember the final score. It was 104 to 72, and it was the Bulls' 8th or 9th loss of the season.
I never knew you went to that game.
Yeah, and it was the only time I ever saw Michael Jordan live, and he lost by 32 points.
That's amazing. Wow. All right, I got to bring you back on the podcast to talk about that. What do you think was the best part of Linsanity? I mean, for something that was so short-lived, think about it. I always think about this. There are so many great Knicks, and over the years, you kind of forget that they were Knicks, like Bob McAdoo. He averaged 20 and 10, 25 and 10, was Hall of Famer, but never known for being a Knick. And Michael Ray Richardson, a guy who averaged 15, 8 and 8. Just really good players. And we kind of forget that they were Knicks because they weren't Knicks at a time when Knicks were ever good. Do you think Linsanity is something we'll ever forget, or is he always going to be enshrined in Knicks history and up there when it comes to when we talk about Knick legends that don't have their names on the rafters? I feel like we talk about Starks and Oakley. Will we talk about Jeremy Lin in that same aspect of he was this amazing, great Knick?
I hope so, because it was easily the most fun 6 weeks to be a Knicks fan than any other period in my fandom. Even better than the 6 weeks leading up to their finals run in '99? Given that I was 10 at the time, I do not remember it quite as well. So
really?
The fact that I was 10 the 99 run. And I was, 22, 23 for Linsanity, so I'm going to remember that a lot better.
And we have a large pocket, where nothing good happened when we were in high school and, our teenage years. I think the most exciting thing was seeing David Lee dive for a loose ball, which wasn't anything, that's nothing magical. Nothing against David Lee. That's not all too exciting, and there is that big gap. But see, for me, even though I was only 8, I remember the 99 finals run, the Houston shot, the LJ 4-point play. Their win against the Spurs. I remember all of that, and I just remember the excitement of that. I remember that so well. I think that was probably more exciting than Linsanity, but I can't think of anything